Ambassador, what do you make of the Kabul process? What do you expect will come up?
The Kabul process has been in place for a while. I think that this is happening from a timeline point of view at a critical time, because there are so many pieces that are being, in movement, in motion. And so you have the war going on and escalating, actually. You have pressures being brought about on countries. You have regional realignments. You have a complex situation. So I think the Kabul process is going to bring about some new ideas from the Afghan government side, both in terms of what needs to be done with the peace process, expectations, and realistic maybe benchmarks that have to be met, as well as what the international community can do and should do in terms of Afghanistan. One of the things that is missing right now is an agreement on a concept of what Afghanistan should represent. Afghanistan, like I think the Chinese have this notion to some extent, has to be a center of cooperation, has to be a center of dialogue, has to be a center of transit and trade and investment and so on and so forth, because of its geography, because of the fact that there are contending interests very deeply rooted in the region, and all of these are out of the control of the Afghan people's hands. And so how do you bring about a solution that to some extent satisfies everybody's national security as well as economic security interests? And I think that that's what the focus should be from here on, instead of the blame game that is going on.
China is involved to a great extent through its Belt and Road initiative in the region. But Shuja, let me ask you this. Pakistan and China are very close allies. China is involved in the CPEC, the economic program inside Pakistan. What kind of diplomatic pressure can China bring on Pakistan to resolve this?
Considerable pressure. The Chinese want to protect their own interest. They also want to stop the backflow of Islamic militancy from Central Asia and from Pakistan into China. The same roads that they're helping build, the infrastructure links to bring stuff from China into Pakistan, into the world, can also take back these militant groups and ideas into Xinjiang. And so they're working very closely with Pakistan, and they are now working very closely with Afghanistan in setting up an operation in the Wakhan corridor, which has been one area in which Central Asian militants could infiltrate into Xinjiang. The Chinese have a very different approach to what the US has, which is that they use quiet diplomacy. They do the big talking behind closed doors. And they also actually deliver on the economic assistance, because they realize that that's really what helps change the landscape. So they have poured in billions of dollars and will pour in billions of dollars of investment into Pakistan. The question now is, can Afghanistan be a partner to that as a tributary to the CPEC infrastructure links that go down to the sea?
PJ, is that a problem with the United States approach, that it makes these statements so publicly? The fact that we heard President Trump say, we're not going to talk with the Taliban. We hear President Trump criticize Pakistan publicly.
I mean, the United States, is the leader of the coalition that is trying to help Afghanistan. This role is inevitable. I think the United States has been trying to draw, China into playing a more open role, not only with respect to Afghanistan, but also with respect to leaning on Pakistan to modify its approach and modify its lens with which how it deals with Afghanistan. But I also think that beyond the economics, I mean, there is a common interest here. All of the countries that have an interest in Afghanistan have a stake in controlling and rolling back political extremism. And all of the countries that neighbor Afghanistan also have a keen interest in helping Afghanistan develop a legal economy, because the narcotics that emanate from Afghanistan, and to some extent the proceeds of that drive this conflict to a very significant degree and undermine Afghan institutions, to a significant degree. They create internal problems, whether you're talking about Pakistan, you're talking about China, you're talking about Iran, you're talking about Russia, or you're talking about the United States. So there are common interests here that can lead you to, political solutions even while you try to turn the tide in terms of the military conflict.
Shuja, of course, the Pakistanis are not just taking the criticism from the United States lying down. The Prime Minister, Shahid Abbasi, has responded to it. Let's listen to what he said.
Our land routes have been used, and they continue to be used. We have over 1 million aircraft, probably 1.2 million now, aircraft sorties through our territory. And there's been no billing. So the world needs to recognize, the US needs to at least acknowledge that Pakistan for the last 15 years has provided ground supply, ground logistics, and air logistics to the US free of cost.
Clearly, the Pakistanis are not happy with the United States. This has become a public spat now. Is it counterproductive?
Yes, it is. And I don't think it helps for Pakistan to recite history, because for the US, history begins now and goes to the future. The US is very poor at remembering history. I mean, how many people in the US would remember that tomorrow is the 29th anniversary of the retreat of the Soviet 40th Army across the Friendship Bridge? These are things that matter. And in Pakistan, the memories are very long, but they really are not using the airline of communication as a point of leverage in their discussion with the United States, because they want to maintain the relationship with the United States. The truth is, if Pakistan were to shut down the airlock, the air war against the Taliban in Afghanistan would be severely damaged, because you couldn't bring any aircraft from the Gulf into the theater of war. You couldn't bring them through the Soviet Union. You couldn't bring them over Iran. But the Pakistanis have chosen not to use that leverage. And I think the US should appreciate that and use that as a point of discussion going forward. The other point I think it's well worth making is that this is a military strategy. The State Department of the United States of America is almost invisible in this process. I think it's very critical for the United States to make this a diplomatic initiative rather than simply a military initiative to fight to the last Afghan.
Let me get PJ's response to that.
Well, I mean, I agree with you that part of an American weakness is a lack of appreciation of history, even though we see great potential in resolving situations. But we are mindful of certain histories. If you go back to the Taliban government, that was a creation of Pakistan. And the fact that Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden died on Pakistani soil, to me, is not a coincidence. When the Bush administration said to President Musharraf, "Are you with us or against us?" Musharraf's answer to American diplomats was yes, but in reality it was maybe. So this is why I've been in meetings in Islamabad between American diplomats and Pakistani diplomats, where we said to Pakistan very clearly, this political extremism is a threat to Pakistan. I think there's a greater appreciation today than there was 8 or 9 years ago. And we also said that a critical component of solving the challenge in Afghanistan lies in the diplomacy between Pakistan and India. And that has to be a critical dimension. Pakistan has to address its challenges, that India should have a relationship with Afghanistan. This is like Mexico objecting if the United States has a relationship with Honduras. If these countries are going to have to learn to live together, Pakistan has to be confident in its relationship with Afghanistan, but Pakistan has to acknowledge that India is going to have a relationship with Afghanistan as well.
Let me correct you.
Right.
The Pakistanis did not create the Taliban. That was a domestic uprising.
Well,
the Pakistanis helped them.
Versions of that.
No, I mean,
we're not going to solve that here.
No, the reality is they may have helped
Right.
in the process, but they did not create it.
All right, I want to get to one final point. We're running out of time, Ambassador.
Quickly.
The U.S. intelligence community has released a document, on Tuesday, actually, for the Senate Intelligence Committee, and it said, among other things, the overall situation in Afghanistan probably will deteriorate modestly this year in the face of persistent political instability, sustained attacks by the Taliban-led insurgency, unsteady Afghan National Security Forces performance, and chronic financial shortfalls.
Mm-hmm. Sure, there are definitely issues within Afghanistan, within the government, security, political, economic as well. There are challenges. They have grown, unfortunately, in some ways. I think the unity government has done its best to manage and mitigate, but it has fallen short. And so they need to rethink as well and readjust their posture and position. These reports show that it's critical. I think 2018 is going to be a critical year. Every time we say, well, this year is going to, but 2018 is going to be critical because there has been a shift in strategy, there's been a change in outlook, and there's a change in the end results that we want to get.
That's where we have to leave it. Great panel. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.